Welcome to Wellness Spring, where we delve into the minds of visionaries shaping the future. Get ready to be inspired. In this episode, we're joined by Stephen Petith, an entrepreneur extraordinaire and the mastermind behind Freedom Ventures, a game-changing initiative revolutionizing our food system. Tune in as Stephen shares his passion for clean, chemical-free produce and his vision for a healthier, more sustainable future. If you care about what you eat and the planet we call home, this episode is a must listen. Welcome, Stephen, to Wellness Spring. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
Lovely to be here. It's great to talk to like-minded people.
Thank you. So I'm curious to know who or what inspired you to help regenerative farmers and create Freedom Ventures.
Yeah, look, it all stemmed. I've spent most of my life living in Asia and predominantly in Asia and the Middle East. I would say it's probably 70% Asia versus the Middle East. And up there, we always used to get all our food direct from the local markets and all that sort of stuff. When I say us, our housekeepers and that. I've been through some medical issues. I got bitten by a spider a few years ago, which nearly killed me. That was a big turning point in my thinking and my life. And it was like, you know what, I need to start giving back. I've got a whole heap of knowledge that I've collected over the years, and I wanted to give that back. So I run my offshore consulting business where I help people look at offshore structures, second citizenships, residency. And then I met a couple of like-minded people because I've always loved buying direct from farmers or seafood or wherever I can. And in Australia, up until a few years ago, it was really hard to do. There just wasn't the real. They had farmers markets, but they're hard to get to. And if you didn't get there at 6:30, most of the product was gone. So since COVID and being back in Australia since COVID, I've just started looking and finding online platforms and stuff like that where I can buy direct, and then it sort of snowballed. Then I met my partners, Adam and Brian. We had the same philosophy around that we need to get back to clean food. We need to support farmers. If we don't have farmers, we starve, and if we don't have small businesses, I'm a big believer in small businesses are what underpins an economy, right? 90% of actual economic throughput is done through small businesses. A lot of those are 1 and 2 man band, but you do get the guys in the middle, the 10 to 20 employee guys. And that's what drives an economy. But more importantly, it's what drives a local community. So I've had all these thoughts, and I've just put these together over the last, I would say, probably 5 to 6 years. And then I'm just putting everything into practice. So.
Fantastic. And you mentioned the word clean regarding food, clean food. So can you explain that a bit deeper?
Yeah, so what I talk about is clean food is it's food that's not genetically modified. It's food that hasn't been excessively sprayed. Now, and I really mean by sprayed by petrochemicals. There is natural alternatives that you can spray food with, but if a farm has the microbes in the soil and all that sort of stuff, and is using bees and putting citrus around and lavender and other bits and pieces, it will regulate its own bugs. So that's the type of stuff I'm looking for. I'm looking at farmers and farming techniques. And meanwhile, these are techniques that were original before the governments and before big industry started to get in the road and overtake our farming system. All food was clean, was natural. We were talking off there before. I don't like the term organic because it gets hijacked by the media shills and all that sort of stuff, and turned into something it's not. It should be just clean traditional food, and food that hasn't been stored. But the other problem is the storage and long-term transport of food actually degrades food because they pump it full of nitrogen and all sorts of other chemicals to make it last longer, and it degrades the product.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about lavender and myrtle and things like that, because I grew up in Wales, and we had 3 small blocks of land in our back garden, and my father used to get cow's manure dumped there about once or twice a year, and do everything naturally. And it was only when I went traveling that you notice a difference in taste and so forth, because his brother had a beef farm and my grandmother had a chicken farm. So, we grew up with a lot of natural food, but it's very different. So Brian, my partner, calls it maggot food when I buy stuff if I can't get hold of anything that's fresh from the farmers, and they don't last very long. And I think, especially, since the COVID lockdown and we didn't have a lot of food coming in, and when we have the floods, you talked about regenerative farming. So what techniques are employed by the farmers that work with you, and how can they contribute to a cleaner food system?
Yeah, so a lot of it is going back to rotational cropping, and using, for instance, having, say, cows graze in one area that you then grow some natural rye or other grasses on in the next season, and then let that wilt down, and so you're not using, so you're not just continually using the same soil. Well, it's not really soil anymore; most of it's dirt. But you're not just using the same paddock or the same portion of the paddock for the same thing over and over and over again, and destroying the actual microbes and everything that's in the soil. So if you go to a chemical-driven farm and pick up the soil, it's dirt. It falls through your fingers. There's nothing binding it together. It's like sand through an hourglass. But if you go to a farm that's got regenerative practices on it, and for a start, it's very hard to dig the soil up, right? Because it's got roots and it's got worms and it's got all these bugs and that in it. But when you do, put a shovel in, turn it over, pick up a handful of soil, it's alive, right? It's got creepy crawlies in it. It's got stuff in it. That's what you want to see, because that's actually where you're getting a lot of the nutrients and stuff into your fruit and veg is coming from all the interaction of all these different organisms, right? And then they're pulling the vegetables and that and trees and whatever it is pulling that out of the soil, and then it's getting replaced. The other thing that happens is naturally in our ecosystem, we have heavy metals, we have arsenics and all that sort of stuff that occur naturally. Now, if you don't have all these organisms and that working together, you're going to get a build-up and concentration of that in the soil or in the dirt. And so basically what you're doing is you're growing stuff in heavy metals, which is not good. And everything's, sucking up that heavy metal. You put water on it, sort of dissolves and away it goes. Where a clean farm, regenerative clean farm, won't have that problem, because the whole system is working in harmony. And that's pretty much what it is. We tend to talk about, it's a hobby farm, right? You got chickens on a run over here, you got some pigs down there, you got some goats over there, you got some cows down the back. But a hobby farm is actually a traditional farm, because if you have a look at what we did in traditional agriculture in agrarian societies, everything was grown within like a 20-minute area of where you lived, and you worked with the seasons. You didn't have this thing where you get avocados all year round. We're not supposed to have avocados all year round. We're not supposed to have root vegetables all year round, right? So there's different ways of doing it. One of the other techniques I like, and I think a lot of restaurants and that can start doing this themselves, is actually using some of the aquaponics and hydroponic systems that are out there to actually grow leafy greens and the herbs and stuff that they want, and even some melon viney type fruits and vegetables that can be grown in the back of the restaurant, or can be grown as, along a wall. One of the trying to think where it is now. I think it's in Davao in the Philippines. We went into a restaurant, and down one side of the restaurant was this big hydroponic setup, and that all the fruit and veg pretty much that was in this restaurant was grown on site. But they had their tomatoes and cucumbers and all the other bits and pieces and all the herbs and all that was all grown there. And that was because they couldn't get the quality that they wanted from the local area, so they did it themselves. And so this is what I'm talking about clean food systems. And it's not mass scale.
That's great. Yeah, because I've spoken to many farmers lately, as you know, that have been doing the transition from traditional, well, I should say the chemical farming to what we now call regenerative farming. And a lot of them are saying, it's so important to move your cattle, if you've got cattle, every 2 days. So that the grass is not chewed, that it's not with all the hard hooves damaging the soil, and it's got chance for the regrowth. And Peter Andrews, OAM, he does the natural sequence farming, and he's all about managing the water and putting the filtration on the top, so it can be carried down and filtered through the land. So it's all little things, but when you mentioned in the shops and having the plants growing up the walls, yesterday I was at the Sydney Royal Agricultural Show, and there was a gentleman there who had a hemp stand, and he started a wall with pot plants, but he said the aim is for people who are struggling to go anywhere or haven't got much space, you can have everything growing in the pots on a vertical, and it's so much cleaner and easier to take care of. But obviously that's small scale, but for restaurants that would be brilliant.
But everyone at home, so you've got all these mobile hydroponic stuff now for people at home, so they can grow their own vegetables and their own leafy greens and their own herbs and all that sort of stuff on a small deck. And with these vertical grow towers, you can grow a lot in a very small, dense space. And because you're recycling a lot of the water and all that sort of stuff, some of the ones that I like have fish in the bottom. They use the I think it's got aquaponics, and they use that, and they've got the fish all in that. So it's a whole regenerative system. So we can take that and then multiply it around.
Great.
But we don't want to go back to industrialization. So
exactly,
there has been a whole thing about vertical grow farms, and they've been industrialized, and they don't work, right? Because they're not meant to be they're not meant to work on scale. They're meant to work on economically positioned and sized for a local community. So they're not meant to grow 50 million tonne of something and then ship it halfway around the world.
Yeah, as you said, it's good to have local and use local businesses. And, before man came to the planet, the earth was running perfectly, especially like from what the tests you can do today. You can see how well the land was nourished and full of nutrients. And then when we came and then started, changing the natural systems of the farms and adding chemicals, everything else has gone downhill. And most importantly, it's the health of the people. A lot of people are not aware of what's causing their sickness, because you're eating the food, but at the moment we're living in a chronic disease society instead of a healthcare society. So I think education plays a big part to let people know. Yeah. So you're starting with meat products is a bold move. How do you envision introducing Freedom Ventures to the market, and what strategies will you employ to expand your product offerings in the future?
Yeah, so Freedom Ventures is all about creating partnerships between distribution and supply. So what we're doing is we're partnering by becoming a shareholder, and then putting what we do best is bring different people together, introduce capital, and grow the system. We've also got access to some very large databases, and then we use those databases then to help promote the product of the farmer. And so that's what we're after. Now, we're starting with one platform that will be across the entire ecosystem. As you said, we're starting with beef, but we're going into vegetables. We'll do seafood. We'll do fruits and nuts, and what we call the value-added or homegrown process, the chutneys and the jams and all that sort of stuff that's coming from small-scale producers. And then we'll get them on the platform, and then the grocery items can be delivered. So you can have really good local produce that is turned into something else, and then have that delivered to your door as well. So that's what we see. It's a vertical and horizontal growth plan, but we have to start somewhere. So we've taken on beef, because that seemed to be the biggest need. Especially with some of the chemicals and injections and vaccines and all that are sort of being mandated around the world. So we thought we'll start there. It's an easy way to fix. There is a demand, and from both, there's a demand from farmers because they're getting squeezed on their farm gate sales. And there's a demand from consumers. Consumers want a cheaper product. And funnily enough, everyone whinges and complains about the cost of organic and that. Well, yeah, organic is going to cost more because you're paying for the word, right? If you go direct, you'll save. And we've had testimonials from people that have said to us, if we bought this whole side of beef from a butcher, it would have cost us $800. But we're getting it from you at $600. If we bought it from Coles and Woolies, it would have cost us $1,200, and we're getting it from you at $600. And look, that might sound a lot to some individuals, but if you get 4 or 5 families together, right, that's $100 each, right? And you'll get meals. You'll get a lot more. So your dollar goes further. So you can eat healthy, you can eat clean, you can support small, medium, local businesses, and reduce all the harmful effects that our current food system has on all the participants in it.
Yeah, well, as we were a large family, my mother used to buy a whole side of an animal or whatever and put it in the big chest freezer. We're talking to an 87-year-old friend today, and he said his family always did that because that was the easiest way of buying it. So maybe the old ways are the best ways. You also mentioned... Yeah, exactly. So you also mentioned to me that it's also going to be the concept of a member-owned business. So can you explain that? You said like the RACQ.
Yeah. So what our envision is we'll roll all this together. We'll put it all the parts together of it. We'll get it operating. We'll get it going, and then what we'll do is we'll offer shares in the company. It's probably the easiest way, or shares in the venture, to all the members of the platform. So if you're a member of the platform, you'll also be a shareholder in the overall business. Now, what form that takes, how we make it work, the model we're looking at is the old member-driven societies like RACV in Victoria, the RACQ in Queensland, NRMA in Victoria, in New South Wales, because they're member-owned organisations. And we think we can do the same thing, is have a large member-owned organisation that's professionally run, and you get benefits because you're buying good, clean food from something that you're a participant in and an equity holder in.
Wonderful. And leveraging technology is often crucial in modern business models. How will Freedom Ventures utilize technology to establish transparency and foster trust between farmers and consumers?
Yeah, at this stage, we haven't done a lot, to be honest. A lot of it is we're allowing and we encourage, go and visit the farm. If you're buying product from a farm that's an hour down the road, phone up the farmer and say, hey, I'm buying your product. Can I come and see your farm? I think that's the best way to build trust. Is once again the old ways. Talk to people. I find a lot of these trust verification things that are online, it's blockchain, it's all bullshit. It's all fugazi. It's all just an absolute wank. All right. And the best way to build trust is talk to people and go and meet people, and go and see what they do and how they do it. And you can have all the stamps in the world. Just have a look at all the stuff that's supposedly recycled with this recyclable logo on it. No one trusts that anymore because it's all crap. No one trusts the Made in Australia logo because there's 50 different ways that you can get around it. So why would you trust it, right? So I think we've got to get away from technology being the only thing. We can put the all the bio background information. We can have videos and all that sort of stuff, which we'll do, and we'll encourage all the platforms to do. But I think at the end of the day, it's got to come up to the consumer to go and build trust themselves, right? Get off these things. Get off these things. These things don't build trust, right? And if that's your only source of truth, you're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot, because you'll be fed more garbage on that thing than you will be from a pizza shop. So absolutely get off that. Go and do direct verification yourself.
Yeah, like you said, go and speak to the farmer if they're that close, and I'm sure word of mouth it will just go viral anyway. And people are ready for a change. They're fed up of feeling sick all the time, and so the biggest challenge at the moment for a lot of farmers that I've spoken to is, if they change from using chemicals, it's very expensive for them. They haven't got the money to change over. But in your experience working with multinational corporations and investment funds, what strategies have you found the most effective in promoting sustainable business practice? And how do you plan to implement similar approaches with Freedom Ventures to help these farmers?
Yeah, so look, the easiest way to do is always raise private capital. And with crowdfunding and small scale investments now through crowdfunding buckets or membership, so buying a membership and having part of that membership go to support a farmer, these are all things that we can do, and they are things that we should be encouraging all our farmers to do. So what we're looking at doing is taking the debt and the corporate debt away from farms, and having it so that the farmer is free from all that big overhead.
That's amazing, Stephen, because when we chatted earlier, we talked about the mental health of these farmers, the stress it's causing them with the big debts that they're under, and many of them want to make the change, and they're working long hours, and are making little money. And from what you're saying, they can make a lot more money, and so can the consumer. It's not going to be so expensive. So I know all startups face challenges. What obstacles have you encountered during the pre-launch phase of Freedom Ventures, and how have you approached them to overcome them?
Yeah, look, really good question. Now, some of the challenges we've faced are more around finding the right people to work with, from a platform perspective, from a distribution perspective, and from farmers themselves. Some farmers want to do it, they start the journey, then they wobble, and then it's hard. The pressures get put on them, and so forth and so on. The farms that we've had the best work with are the farms that are debt-free and can make their own decisions without having any pressure put on them. So that's been a challenge, is finding the right farms to work with. But as we scale, we'll get around those challenges. And the other thing is been making sure that we can scale in a sustainable way. Like it's really hard to scale and keep scale happening. So that's always a challenge, and we're going to find and backfill it with the right people. So everything's a people problem.
And there's always solutions.
Always solutions, yeah.
Yes. I always ask my guests, if there was one thing you could do to change the world, what would it be?
Oh, God, so many. If there was one thing, remove all large-scale industrialized corporatism out of society. So one of the things that people don't realize is we don't live in a capitalist society, right? We live in a corporatized society where corporations are making decisions and influencing politicians to put laws on us for the benefit of a corporation. And that's the difference. That's what people really need to understand, is we live in a corporatist world. We don't live in a capitalist world. Capitalism died in the 80s. Because since the 80s, we've had the sharpest decline of small and medium businesses. Capitalism works when small and medium businesses are at the top and they're thriving and being listened to by government.
Wow. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. And I want to wish you good luck with this new venture. Just before we leave, is there anything you'd like to share with the listeners? Or have we covered it all?
The one thing I would say is, and it's the one thing I say to a lot of people, the harsh truth. If you're not supporting small local businesses, your local farmer, local baker, local butcher, you're the problem, right? And until you understand that you're the problem because of your voting pattern, your buying pattern, if you go for convenience, you're not going to get the best outcome for society. So I just want to leave that is people to really have a real hard look at themselves, because 9 times out of 10, you're going to be the problem.
Wonderful words of advice. Thank you so much.